we live in a vacuum because we are human beings. And then on top of all of this, October 7th. So what happens after shocking events? Our bodies go through this fight or flight, right? Where you have this adrenaline rush, the fast heartbeat, you know, everything shuts down. Growth, reproduction, immune system, all of this shuts down in favor of thinking you're in danger, but you don't know of what. So you're like, your body's preparing you to run away from some sort of danger, but you're just watching a video after a video. Where's this energy gonna go? Well, if you're a child in the classroom, this is gonna show up as hyperactivity, as lack of focus in the class, right? And it's hard. It's hard on children that go to public school. Like the story of the second grader who was having lunch, and on her lunch table, these little cute innocent children were sharing what their father does for a living. And one of the girls who were sitting, she said, well, my dad makes the things that kill Palestinian terrorists. She comes home to mom. Mom has been watching one video after one video after one video. And she says, Mom, I want to tell you something that happens. And the mom says, let's talk later. I can't do it right now. But later never comes. So in our homes, you know, the person that's supposed to be the healing is bleeding, right? So it's like we're bleeding on each other. We're bleeding on each other in the dining room, in the study room, in the office, in the kitchen. Now here's what happens, right? With chronic stress, and I wanna preface this because you might be like, yeah, pandemic did nothing to me, or the Muslim ban did nothing to me. But the studies say otherwise. Really, the studies say otherwise. What happens with chronic stressor, one after another, right? We talked about like from 9/11, the Muslim ban, all your personal struggle, all your personal illnesses, your family troubles. And then what happened? Your immune system becomes weaker. You become much more likely to get sick. You become less effective as parents. So, you know, some time ago, maybe a decade ago, we used to say that, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But actually, what doesn't kill you kills you slowly. It doesn't really make you stronger. So what happens when we are faced with hardship after hardship? We can only become stronger if there's someone at home to offer support. So if that second grader goes home to an adult, to a mom, to a dad, to an older sibling that has a sturdy kind of springboard that says, you know, put your suffering on me, I'm willing to listen, right? Then actually that can make that child stronger, right? But if that pain comes home to no support, that then doesn't confer any kind of resiliency. Now here's what happens after constant emotional disappointment and emotional pain. Is people burn out. People get emotionally exhausted. And when you're emotionally exhausted, you can't offer compassion to your loved ones. You can't offer compassion to yourself. You have no patience because your energy is finite. And if you used all your compassion on watching videos and reading the news one after the other, your compassion well runs out. Then loved ones come home, you have no more compassion to give to the people who desperately need you, and you need them. So unfortunately, what happens when kids don't find this kind of comfort at home after a stressful day at work, and our youth and our children, especially the ones that go to public school, they go to university, they're in the public arena, it is very tough out there. It really is. From struggling to find a place to pray, from having to write essays and research papers that are very antithetical to what they believe in, from having to not being able to say what they believe in because they're worried they're not going to get a good grade. All of this over time makes what I call moral injuries. So then what happens over time to them? That actually can cause some changes in the way their genetics is expressed, that weakness is not only limited to our generation, but can actually be passed on to the following generations who never witnessed any of this. Like, let's say, for example, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam, right? He's all capable. Let's say that the next generation, Palestine is free, everything is good, there's no discrimination, the world is beautiful. But our kids who never witnessed any of this, because of the changes in our genetic expression, because of the pain that we have gone through, because of the constant disappointment, and because of the constant betrayal in what's happening, can actually be passed on to the next generation. So we can pass on this vulnerability for illness and psychological illness too, not just for physical illness. And that's why it's really important to take time and to put on a narrative that is a narrative of strength and resilience. Our kids need to hear that at home. Our kids can't hear on the family table that, you know what, they're so much stronger. Well, what can we do? We can't do anything. There's nothing to do. Look at all the Arab nations. They're not doing anything. We can't keep talking like this, specifically for boys. That actually lowers their testosterone levels. When they keep hearing this, we're losers mentality. We're not, because Allah says that in the Quran, and we should have complete belief in every letter and diacritic that's in the Quran. And we should assure our kids of this. Although we're uncertain of the present moment, we are certain of the inevitable future moments, inshallah. So how do you know if, as a parent, you are burnt out? Wallahi, after one presentation, I will never forget this Palestinian lady. Never, ever in my life. She was so expressive. We sat in a circle after to talk, just us women. And she was, I want to say, maybe in her late 40s, 50s, like her children were older. Were old at that time, like university students, maybe working. She was crying hysterically, and she was saying, I just want to die. She says, I feel guilty to take a shower because my brother calls and says, we can't flush the toilet, we can only make wudu once a day because there's no water. I mean, that's back then. Probably now he can't even make wudu. How can I take a shower? How can I eat? Some people get phone calls saying 15 people in your family died. Like, it is heavy, it is tough. It is very tough. And if we did not enter into this, and that's why we have to constantly be working on our iman. We don't wait for the hardships to make us bend on our knees and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because this constant renewal of our iman prepares us for such difficult moments. And then you see the strength in some of these women in Gaza, in some of these Palestinian women, of resilience, of a smile, right? After burying their kids and still saying Allahu Akbar. That kind of faith is actually what's bringing people to Islam. It's like, what do these people know about happiness? What do these people know about this world or some other world that we don't know, that they are able to bury 15 people in their family and still say Allahu Akbar instead of blaming God? What is it? And I'm sure you've seen many stories on TikTok of people entering Islam because of that question. But let me tell you something. If we don't talk about our pain and explain the depth of how this is affecting us, nobody knows. When I was talking to the NPR journalist who stayed with me on the phone, I want to say, I don't want to lie, but it seemed to me according to my memory, maybe an hour and a half. And she kept saying, I never thought about that. I never thought that the community would be going through, I never thought about it this way. I never thought about that type of pain. She didn't know because we're not telling our story. If we're not going to talk about our pain and explain, don't wait for somebody else to put the bandage on the pain that you never explained. We have to explain. It doesn't mean that we're weak, but we need to explain. This is making our children at school not focus as well. If your child goes to public school, it doesn't hurt to send a letter to the teachers and say that, or to the academic counselor. My child is affected by the recent events. Doesn't matter where she or he stands. She has to act on that letter and take it into consideration because now it's documented. But if we don't explain that, how does the teacher know that, regardless of where she stands? What's so alarming and scary about parental burnout, when you completely burn out, you're done, there's no compassion, is that you want to distance yourself from your children. let's talk later. And later never comes. And that kind of parenting is just a recipe for all kind of in adulthood, for these children to suffer from all kind of disorders, physical and psychological. And that's why we have to titrate. We have to, everybody has a different depth to their compassion, well. Maybe you can handle a lot more exposure. Somebody else like myself, I'm very sensitive. I can't handle too many of these videos. If I see too many of these videos, I won't be able to do anything else. So I need to get enough to get informed and act on that information. But more than that, then I won't show up for the people I love dearly and who need me dearly. Everybody knows themselves. Everybody knows their threshold. How do you know you're burnt out? Here are some of the symptoms that you might want to, start being concerned if you feel like this is happening. So one, you feel like you need to distance from your children, right? Like your children are coming home, you really don't want to be with them. You just, don't want to be around them. You're exhausted either physically or mentally. And usually parents of young children, they will describe their burnout as physical exhaustion. And parents of teenagers, it's more emotional exhaustions because of the constant questions of why and why not and all of that. Using food or prescription drugs to numb the pain, because we know that emotional pain and physical pain in the brain, they overlap. Whether I get a hammer and it fell on my finger, that kind of pain is the same pain as me getting socially rejected in the brain. Doesn't know the difference. Being very irritable is also a sign of burnout. So this woman was telling me, I don't know, I just can't take anything, like anything that's said in my house, I just freak out and I'm angry all the time, angry outbursts. Disrupted sleep pattern. So you're either having a hard time staying asleep or maintaining a sleep or waking up at abnormal times, like 2 o'clock in the morning and not being able to go back to sleep. And it's not because you're doing tahajjud. Feeling anxious, feeling shame, feeling depressed, feeling isolated. So some of the ways to manage this burnout, if you find yourself in that list on the red, on the left, is to have a social support, which I think, alhamdulillah, we are really blessed as Muslim because you're doing social support right now. Everybody in this room, when I talk about this, they know exactly what I'm talking about. We all have the same pain. We're all crying the same tears. We're all shedding the same tears and, the same blood. And subhanallah, recently, the most prestigious National Institute of Health is really kind of like ringing the alarm on the prevalence of loneliness in the States and saying that we need to do something about the loneliness endemic because it's killing people, it's making them sick, and it's costing a lot of money. Because not everybody has this. Not everybody has family night on Fridays. Not everybody has to, at least for the men, to meet every Friday in a big gathering and listen to, a short lecture on update on the ummah and shake hands and then go on to do the work. That is a privilege and a blessing. Maybe we don't appreciate as somebody some older people will actually go to the bank. They have no banking needs. They go just to speak to a person. They go to speak to a teller, to a bank teller, because they have nobody, they haven't spoken to anybody. People who don't see people, who don't have family, who live alone, and if they have nobody visiting them for a month, their chance of dying is really high. This is reminiscent of the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said something to the effect that, being needed by your family, serving your family can actually extend your lifespan because you're needed. So this is such a beautiful blessing, subhanAllah, that we have embedded in our religion, because our religion has rights for your friends. Like your friends have rights upon you. If they invite you, you should answer the invitation. You should never be like, oh, well, I don't know. If you get invited, you should answer that invitation. as long as there's no haram going on there, but you should really try to answer the invitation, especially if it's a wedding. If they need a ride. Like, we have a lot of, this is a unique religion that says your friends have rights upon you. Your neighbors have rights upon you. SubhanAllah, this is all like in Surah Al-Asr too. The other thing is that maybe some days are very difficult. So just that 15 minutes before everybody comes home, you feel irritable, you feel like you watch too many videos, you see the world is black, and you just know that whoever's gonna come through that door is gonna get the worst of you because of the exposure that you've had during the day. Then have a buddy system of saying, listen, when I have days like that, I'm gonna call you. And I want you to listen for 10 minutes. And I will do the same to you. Get it over, then when your loved ones come home, you're better able to receive them. Give yourself time out. But instead of saying, I can't talk right now, like that person did to the second grader, instead of saying that, say that, you know what, give me 15 minutes and I'll be ready to talk. It is so crucial that after all this uncertainty in the world, that when we can be certain with our loved ones, we should be. I need time out for myself for about 15 minutes. Let me collect myself and then come back. So there's a finite time, it's 15 minutes. It's not later, which is very vague. And be resourceful. Like sometimes, some days we really do need help. They're really bad days, and maybe you do need help that day. Some of the concerning signs for children, right? Like the other ones were for adults. If your child is potty trained and they start bedwetting. Let me tell you something that I've heard, and I've heard this from actually different kids of the same age group in different places, right? And this one boy, is really like, it's a very, I remember him saying this very clearly, this was at a camp. Kids who are like younger than 10, they don't know that Palestine is thousands of miles away. They think the bombing is happening in the backyard. Little kids don't have abstract thinking. So when they're thinking that the police, the bombing, all of that, they're thinking it's happening next door. Especially that the news in the States is so interested in such a far region in the world. So they assume it must be a nearby city. And I have heard this from little kids around that age, one after the other. I've had kids that would have nightmares of saying that I am so scared. In my nightmare, I dreamt that I lost my mom, that they killed her. They don't realize that this is thousands of miles away. We really have to be respectful of the developmental age of the children when we are talking around them, right? Understand, maybe there are some very mature children for their age at 11, but really younger than 10, 9, graphic things shouldn't really be discussed or shown to them. I'm not saying we don't tell them anything. Of course we should tell them lots of things, but that's age appropriate. Some, 5 and younger, get the dinosaurs, get the Legos, and explain. And, now I'm entitled to your Legos because you shared it with me. And you definitely have to start teaching them all these events. But the depth, how graphic, they're very concrete in their thinking. They're very yes and no, black and white, nearby in my house or on the moon. Nothing in the middle. So if they start to wet the bed, but they've already, outgrown that time, that's a concerning sign. Nightmares are signs. If the grades drop all of a sudden, and there's no reason why, if they start to become physical and aggressive with their siblings, and they haven't really been like that. That's your kids, right? They haven't been like that, but all of a sudden they take their phone and they hide it under the couch. Or they'll go and push their older sibling. They're acting out the aggression that they're seeing, and they're saying, I can't beat them up, but I'm gonna beat anybody up. So punishing them for that behavior would not be the best thing, right? Understanding their pain and where that kind of externalization of their pain coming from would probably be a better thing. So any changes in personality in children, we should be really keen on picking up on that. Then in older people, in young men and women and youth, they might be saying things like, what is the point of all of this? Well, we can't do anything, right? Why is Allah doing this? Why does Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, allow bad things to happen? Mama, but aren't they praying all night? Aren't they doing tahajjud? Aren't they praying for them from Mecca? Why then would Allah allow this? These are dangerous questions, and if they are not answered, these are aqeedah questions. We don't play around when it comes to aqeedah, right? Because just that, like, you're not going to build the second and third floor if there's no foundation. So these are aqeedah questions that really need to be answered, right? Why are we so weak? Why are dua not getting accepted? And it's okay if we don't have the answers. As a parent, you're not supposed to be everything. But you're supposed to link them to everything when you don't have the answer. Now, I want to say that if we're feeling guilty, if we're feeling sad, if we're feeling angry, if we're feeling frustration, I want to say congratulations. Because the Prophet ﷺ says that we are one ummah. If, like the body, if one part is in pain, the rest of the body stays up in fever. We should be feeling sad for them. We should be commiserating with them. We should be angry at what's happening. These are all, required emotions of an ummah that feels for their brothers and sisters. It's not okay if these feelings are interrupting or are making you impaired at your schoolwork, at your work, in your relationships, as a parent, as a spouse. Now we're getting into the clinical a little bit. And that can be, we don't want this to finish inshallah, and then we inherit all of these psychological. We don't want to get weaker. We really do not want to get weaker. I remember after one time I was giving this presentation, these two lovely ladies, they came up and they said, we can't focus on our exams. We come to study, we can't. The events just keep coming. So I said to them, I want you to outsource your working memory on a sticky note. Every time you have this passing thought, put it on a sticky note. And, the list can get long, and you can tell that sticky note, I'll attend to you when the time comes. Because we are as strong as an ummah. We are, our ummah is the sum of our strength. If we're strong, if we're reliable, if we are ethical, if we are knowledgeable, we are a strong ummah. But if we're not, we may be a little bit add up to something, but nothing significant. We really, and subhanAllah, I saw some numbers today. I am a consultant on this project in Canada. I grew up in Canada. And this is with the University of Toronto Medical School. And we're doing, it's a project for a program for addiction to be to the imams and the families and stuff. So I was looking into, this is for a second paper, people who are born, native born. This is in Canada, but the US, there's no difference. Or people who are immigrants. SubhanAllah, I was so wrong for so many years in how I thought about this. Because I really believe in data and research. And you know what they said? They actually said, and I'm either going to make some enemies or I don't know, but they said that immigrants are much better emotionally and psychologically than native-born Muslims. Okay? More to the point, the more recent the immigrant, the one that recently immigrated, is doing the best out of all of them. The longer the immigrant stays in the Western country, the more chances of all not these so well things. I always had it backwards, to be honest, until I looked at this research, right? Not to deviate so much. Hopelessness, helplessness. These words are not in our Islamic heritage. A Muslim does not become hopeless. Al-Yas is not from us. This is not something the Muslim Ummah does. I heard this story once. The person was saying it's mentioned in Ibn Kathir, and I know Ibn Kathir has a lot of Israeliyat and not everything is factual, but let's not take that, let's take the point of the story, right? And the story goes that Ibrahim alayhi salam, when they made a fire for him, the ant, how big is the ant, right? Was bringing water to extinguish the fire. Imagine the ant, like come on, like an ant is gonna extinguish the fire? So they asked the ant of like, why would you do that? You know it's not gonna do anything. And the ant said, because on Judgment Day, when I'm asked if I did something, the answer is I did. We need to think like that ant. When we're asked, we should not be thinking, but is this enough? This is what I hear from everybody. Is this enough? But what I'm doing is not enough. That's not what you're asked. We should not be wedded to the outcome. In my humble opinion, I think for us to be wedded to the outcome is a type of arrogance. If we did something, we need to see the war end tomorrow. Why? Who do we think we are? Why don't we just do our part? So when we're asked, we did our part and not question. And by the way, the little parts here and there, they are working, right? Maybe it's not, although now the news is softening because CNN realized that at this point, if they don't show a part of the truth, there's no more journalism. And I know that now some of like NPR, for example, they did a moral injury training for their people because they were feeling, like, how do we report on this when the philosophy of the company is something else? So no, there is movement. The highest official in the US government, Josh Paul, I don't know if you heard of him, he's all over everywhere, resigned over this. He resigned over this. He's all over, everywhere, NPR, everywhere, saying that, I'm sorry, I refuse to sell weapons. I refuse to be a dealer for weapons on behalf of the US government. You should look him up. And when you look him up, you should send him a thank you note. I did, and he got back to me. Josh Paul. I hope I didn't mix it. Josh Paul. He's in The Guardian, everywhere. Yeah, the highest direct, like his resignation goes to Biden. Very high up. We have to take time to also send thank you notes. And if that thank you note comes with some sort of like even small money, that would be lovely. Because think about it, somebody in the government, they are not for anybody. They are for just winning. But when they realize they got 1,000 thank you notes and everybody, I don't care if you send $20, $1, $3, $5, 50, 100, 1,000, that thank you note is like, let me look in what their narrative is. What are they saying? And then look into representing you. Not everybody's gonna have it in you to fight on your behalf. And to be honest, not all of us know about all the injustice in the world. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? Not all of us know about every kind of injustice in the world. Even though we should be investing in supporting somebody who is oppressed anywhere, right? But our time here does not allow for that. So we have to make people interested in this cause somehow. Usually money is pretty strong motivator. So some of the tools that I would like to share is that budget time to be emotional. Budget time to worry. Say that, like, you know what, from 6 o'clock, whatever time works for you. Let's say from 6:30 to 7 p.m., I'm gonna worry. I'm gonna worry about how, like, we have to boycott everything and I don't know what products and it's so hard. We'll worry about, should I, Walmart, I'm worried about my kids going to Walmart. Worry about, watch the videos. Do all of that, but you have a finite time, 30 minutes. And it can't be like, okay, one more video, because that usually is 10 more videos, right? So 30 minutes and that's it. Because remember, we need you. We need you. One of the best way to oppress you is to paralyze you and freeze you. We don't want to be frozen for 20 years and then unfreeze to see the world has moved 20 years ahead. You have to keep moving. You have to keep moving. I like sticky notes when I have these intrusive thoughts of like, but I can't believe this is happening. How many children? Put them on a sticky note. But how am I going to put them on a sticky note? I'm going to attend to you later when I'm finished with this task. Focus on what is within your control. For some reason, we are so occupied with focusing on everything outside our control. What is within your control? You don't have to be an influencer with 1 million followers. I mean, if you are, please use that. But you don't have to be that person. I was buying a latte from a coffee barista. Of course, it was at Starbucks. And I'm standing there. And, you know, like I bought from her a couple of times, so she's very pleasant to me. I'm pleasant to her. And she's like, so how's it going? I said, oh, to be honest with you, to be completely genuine, it's not good. Why? Told her about Gaza. I'm like, and it's like, oh, well, is there anything I can do? Yeah, there's a protest this weekend. She sent me the flyer. She's like, anybody can do that. The thing is, though, where was your credibility? Where was your integrity before what happened? Because guess what? When you had integrity and ethics before, your story is much more believable than anybody else. But if you didn't, and you weren't the most pleasant neighbor, and you were the one that's calling the cops on your neighbors all the time and blocking their driveway, and you know, it's hard to then buy your you're almost harming the issue. You're almost antithetical to the issue at that point. You know, I was interviewed once by Vogue magazine, who, whenever I always push Gaza, but they don't always feature it. Like NPR, I really, like, if you see the articles in the LAs, please send them a thank you note. They featured it on their main page. They featured it on their main page. That took a lot of risk and courage. A lot of times when I do, I write for Psychology Today magazine, and I put something about Gaza, and like it was just an example. And they said, I'm sorry, this is political, we don't want to take sides, and they took it out. I'm gonna be the ant that tries. I don't care if it works, but I'm gonna be the ant. I'm good enough as an ant. I'm good, I don't need to be a lion. I'm good enough as an ant. And so she was saying, and I said, that, so it was about New Year's resolution, and she said, do you make New Year's resolutions? That was her first question. I said, no, do you still want to interview me? Because that's what the article. So I said to her, well, for me, I make values. And last year, the value I was practicing for that year was being genuine and authentic. And I was talking to her about Gaza, right? Which is a value, obviously, in our religion, big time. So I think when people know that, they can not like you. They can have beliefs that are the opposite of your beliefs, but they will respect you. And when you are respected, you are believable and credible. You don't need that people are, going to be pleasing to you or that are going to love you. You need to be respected, somewhat predictable, somewhat a man and woman of value. So don't underestimate your actions, right? The outcome is always up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the most beautiful dua I learned from my Islamic studies teacher, may Allah bless him, ya Rabbil Alameen, is this dua that I really, subhanallah, so much peace comes with that dua. Allahumma inni abra'u ilayka min kulli hawli li wa quwwa wa alja'u ila hawlika wa quwwatik. Oh Allah, I let go of all of my power and I hide under your power and your capability. That's infinite. If you're going to be attached to your power, that might not always work. Let's just say that. But if you say, we're going to be the ant, we're going to do our part, no matter how small it is, that conversation with the barista, like I went to the bank teller and I was talking to her about Gaza. But that rapport that we had from before gave way, made that pathway for me to have that conversation with her, right? Social systems are obviously very important. Go beyond the present moment. Let's not tell our children that victory is near. Don't worry, we're going to see. We don't know that. We can't predict the future, right? We don't know if victory is near. We know victory is inevitable. That's not the same thing as near. We are going to plant the seeds. Let's not be so selfish and arrogant to demand to see the fruits during our lifetime. Insha'Allah, it might be, and we hope desperately that it would be, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would bless us to see the seeds of the fruits of this. But it's okay to build, like the Sahaba, the people who died before us, they have planted so many seeds and we're enjoying these fruits right now. They weren't selfish to say, well, I want to see that right now. Go beyond the present moments. Give them the assurance that victory will happen 100%. The when, the how, the why, that's in the hands of Allah. These questions are not questions we're supposed to ask. Like when the Prophet ﷺ was asked about when is the time of Judgment's Day, this is not a question to be asked. These are types of questions we don't ask. And our children should be taught that in their Aqidah 101. We have to fix the narrative, right? We need to tell the old stories in a new way, right? We need to tell the old stories in a new way. All the battles, all the amazing things that happen, right? Our children should learn about this. Story time should be learned about this. Subhanallah, like our children, even if they go to Islamic school, a lot of the books they read in English, it is just propagating the same type of thinking. You're never going to go anywhere if you are studying within that box. And subhanallah, we have something to give. We have something to give. In the Quran, there's a lot of verses that says, Ya ayyuhan nas, right? Like people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't, the believer doesn't wake up in the morning, alhamdulillah, the earth is flat for them. And then the non-believer goes, oops, no flat earth. This is mercy from Allah for everybody. Everybody else, like the Eastern philosophy and all of that, they were able to market themselves and ship these ideas in a way, but we have a lot to say about our religion. There's a lot of gems, there's a lot of benefit, there's a lot of recipes for happiness in our religion. We need to be convinced of that. We need to package that first for our children. They need to believe it. We need to believe it. And subhanAllah, it's not really the hardships that are going to break us, or the struggles, or the traumas, but it is if these struggles and traumas and all of these things come when the person has a strong meaning and purpose, that they do very well in life. You would be so surprised, and inshallah I'm going to end with this notion to allow time for Q&A. You would be so surprised because after the pandemic, everybody was asking big existential questions. Why am I here? What's the meaning in life and what's the meaning of life? These questions, any kindergarten that you get that went to Saturday school for a month knows the answer to. Why are you here? Well, we're here to worship Allah, right? But you would be so surprised when I train mental health professionals to maintain their licensure. You have to do sessions on teaching them how to teach their patients to find meaning and purpose in life because that's good for them. But that kindergarten knows his meaning and purpose in life from 5. Because subhanAllah, when we have a meaning, we know why we're here, we know our purpose in life, you have less chances of depression, you have less chances of anxiety, you have also less chances of an aging brain and dementia. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone who memorized the Quran who has Alzheimer's disease. I've never come across that, right? So anyways, subhanAllah, we have a script for exactly what's going to happen after life. And when you're not afraid of death, you live a life worth living. SubhanAllah. And I feel like as Muslim, that with a strong iman, that these hardships are very hard. They are very hard. That is true. But I think born out of this, there will be what's called now post-traumatic growth, not post-traumatic stress disorder, but post-traumatic growth, which now scientists are talking about when really bad things happen and they break you and they invite you to think again a new perspective about the meaning of things. I think what's happening right now is inviting every one of us to think deeply about what is this life? What is my purpose again? What am I supposed to be doing? And it's really, putting things in perspective, not just for us older people, but also for the young ones too. They are asking excellent questions. I find that our youth, after learning about this and seeing that resilience, they have matured quite a bit as a result of this. Jazakumullahu khairan. I'm going to stop here. So if you have any questions, they can address bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Yes. No, it was initially it was Leslie. Her name is Leslie. I don't know the last name. I have long COVID. I don't remember my kids' names, but I know her first name is Leslie.
Because usually these news items come after the 7 a.m. news.
Oh, this was featured on the main news. This was featured in their magazine is called Alayast in print. It was in the main page. A huge article.
Because there's a marked difference in the reporting from 4 months ago as compared to now.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it's a little more balanced, nuanced.
I think because they realized you would have to compromise the ethics of journalism completely to keep flying.
And most of these reporters report this thing. They're probably more appreciative of the fact that things are okay here in the United States because it's all about Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just for parents to train their children to be kind of limited rather than just being on social media.
Well,
So much false information out there.
Other than the false information, like the American Psychological Association came up with a statement, actually a pretty stern statement, that children should not be using screen that much. I was interviewed by Yahoo Parenting on a new thing called anti-dopamine parenting, which is basically you are limiting pleasure for the child so they can be stronger. It's like, really? Okay, anyhow. So one of the things is like that now, is the limiting screen time, because you do get addicted to screen time. It does affect your self-esteem and identity. People dissociate when they're on social media, children, teens or not. But especially during the teen years, that is the time that your identity is formed. So I won't say categorically, because every parent, is up how, whether you allow social media or not, if you do allow it, to limit that time. When my daughter was in 7th grade, we read an article together about how social media affects the self-esteem of girls. She is going to be 21 next month, inshallah ta'ala. She does not have social media until this day. Her friends make fun of her because her social media is Google and WhatsApp. And it's hard when she played tennis, like, but everything is on. But, she managed. And I find that was a big thing in her to have her identity and not have to go through some of the other things that young women had to go through. You're welcome.
How can ways to encourage have healthy habits? Because some children don't do this, but they're going to get bored with it. For example, just like sports,
Yeah.
parents can set the example.
You actually said 2 of the tools yourself right now. One, you said for parents to mentor the example. It can't be like what this mother was telling me, that her daughter's teacher was telling her that her daughter doesn't have eye contact. And she realized is because whenever her daughter is talking to her, she's like this, and she doesn't give eye contact, right? That's not good modeling. If you're like taking your screen with you everywhere, including the bathroom, what kind of behavior are you modeling? And then saying, well, for you have to have limited time. So you said the mentoring, that's excellent. Yes. You said also to provide an alternative, right? You can't say that I'm going to take the chair, but I expect you to sit. What are the alternative? Gardening. When she's 13 now, when she was younger, we ordered these things, these art by pieces, right? From Amazon. Now we don't order from Amazon because of boycott. but it was like, it's a big thing, art, and it can get as complicated to adulthood, right? Like for all ages. And it's like a shape of, and then each little piece is a number, and that number corresponds to a color. So you don't have to be an artist, but something beautiful comes out of it, and it's very time consuming. So that's number 2. Gardening, mentoring a younger sibling or tutoring, right? Like the library, you can volunteer, I think at age 12 or 13. All of these other ways. And then don't cut like cold turkey, because they will actually, her name is Dunkley, Dr. Dunkley. She's a psychiatrist. She wrote a book about screen time. She was like all over. And she says, her thing, she's a psychiatrist, says, I will not treat anybody from autism, from ADHD, from anything until they fast from screens for 1 month. After that, if the symptoms pertain, still stay, I will treat them. And a lot of the times the symptoms go away. The irritability. A lot of the times the child, again, I won't say yes to screen time, no to screen time, that's up to the parent, but say you have 30 minutes of screen time. After the 30 minutes, the child is sitting, then you say, oh, subhanAllah, Ahmed, I noticed that we agreed to the 30 minutes, but something really weird I noticed. What, Mom? I noticed that after screen time, every time you're not happy. And you seem irritable and you feel sad. It looks like it's not making you happy. Should we look for something else that makes you happier? You're not saying no, but you're pointing and this does happen. You get more irritable, you get more sad, because it's releasing so much dopamine, and that's saying to the brain, keep doing it. Not that you like it. Dopamine doesn't tell you that I like what I'm doing. It tells you you need to continue doing it. There's 2 separate things. So when they're like, oh wait, you're right, like last time I didn't feel good, I felt like kind of blah, which is kind of like what they feel, and irritable, then they're willing to try something else. The other thing is, something I would do, because I'm just that kind of parent, is maybe make screen time doing something very cognitively demanding. Like, a game that requires a lot of thinking, where they get tired. Usually they give it to you before the 30 minutes. They're like, no, I think I'm good, right? So these kind of tools are very important. The other thing is that don't have retrieval cues, because it's like addiction, right? You don't have cocaine, things associated with that next to the addict. So you have to have your house almost in modules. So everything that's electronic is in one place, far away from their sight. Then they won't remember, because they would have to remember, then they have to go get it, and it's on top of the closet, on the left, making it harder to get it. You're still gonna give the 30 minutes, but there's all these steps. So these are some of the successful things that you can do, inshallah.
The alternative, if you want to enable good habits, because I feel like that would probably keep them busy, right?
Yeah. So making it not accessible, meaning that it's not in front of them. It's not in the it's not in the living area where we sit and watch TV, for example. It's maybe it's in a room far away in the house, and they have to get it depending on how big the house is. But it's like in a module far away. And also, sometimes you don't know you enjoy something until you do it. Like parents will be like, I don't know if they I want to know, let me ask, do you like soccer? Do you like to do this? Do you like to, they don't know if they like it. They don't know. So they have to dabble into, you just have them try all of these things out and then see where their skills match their passion, right? And then that is the intersection point we would focus on. Yeah, no, you do. I think we want to settle so fast. And I tell my students that too, like you're pushed to pick a major in the first year. But really, it's all the fun stuff is at the interdisciplinary, and it's like dabbling into all of these things. That's a good thing. You're not wasting your time by doing that. So. Oh, yes.
You're building this rubric of resilience on one end. And on the other end, I think one of the most vivid pictures I remember was when a Palestinian woman was carrying her son, because when you martyr, you're expected to be this strong, I'm so thankful, but you're still a mother on the other end, and you're still grieving. And I feel like culture kind of insinuates a sense of shame. You have to be resilient, you have to do this. but if you shed a tear or you question or you have those moments of weakness, you're not following that rubric. So my question is, what advice would you give someone to balance that and to kind of get rid of that shame and say, it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to feel angry. That is not the same thing as losing your faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or tawakkul. Those are two separate things. And Islam encourages negative emotions and know that that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you. So I would say like our culture does that. It shames someone and it expects a certain rubric and almost takes a sense of something natural. A mother will grieve the loss of her son or her daughter or her sibling or something like that. So what advice would you say psychologically or to our culture or to anything or to anyone if they're battling that? How do we approach that? How do we have those discussions without feeling judgmental or attacking or something like that?
I would say, and inshallah we'll end with that question, I would say that I follow the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. What did the Prophet do when he lost his son? What did the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam do when he lost his son? Did he not cry? Did he not say that if these mountains, right? Did he not say that? Did he not express grief? Do we not have 3 days of support for the grieving person? Do we not have a rubric to support the person? Why would they need support if they're not sad? Right? And why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create the machinery in our nervous system for sadness, for shame, for anger, if we're not supposed to experience them? Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promise the believer that that when they die, that they hear, no, you shall no longer fear or feel sadness? Why? Why these two emotions specifically? Because they hurt during lifetime. You are absolutely right. And I hope, inshallah, that in our community, we don't stigmatize emotions like that, because that is a part of the machinery that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with. There's a function to sadness. There is a function for anger. There's a function for shame. I am against, also the Western way of thinking about shame, that shame is a bad emotion. I don't think so. There is pro-social shame. Well, Jazakumullahu khairan. I think we'll end with that question. Allah yabarik fiki ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah make us an ummah of strength and just keep moving forward. No freezing, don't be frozen in the moment.